You know what's funny about inflation? Most people panic. They see prices going up and they do the obvious thing. They spend less, save more, maybe buy some canned goods and call it a day. But then there's this other group of people who've been dealing with unstable economies for, I don't know, about 2,000 years. And they don't panic. They prepare. They pivot. They protect. And honestly, they've gotten pretty good at it. I'm talking about Jewish families and how they think about money when everything's getting more expensive. Not in a conspiracy theory way, in a historical survival way. Because here's the thing. When you've spent centuries getting kicked out of countries, watching currencies collapse, seeing entire economies flip overnight, you develop a certain relationship with money. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. And inflation? That's just another Tuesday. Growing up, I remember my grandfather kept 3 currencies in his desk drawer. Not because he was planning a vacation. He just didn't trust any single one of them completely. He'd say prices lie, but value tells the truth. Which I didn't understand until I was older and realized he was basically describing inflation in 7 words. So today, I want to show you 5 ways Jewish communities have traditionally protected wealth during inflation, not by hiding under mattresses or buying bunkers, but through strategies that have worked across generations, countries, and economic disasters. Some of it might surprise you. Some of it might seem obvious once you hear it. But all of it comes from real experience, the kind you don't learn in business school, but around dinner tables where people remember what it was like when money stopped being money. By the way, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments because I'm genuinely curious how inflation is hitting different places right now. Is rent going crazy where you are? Groceries? Gas? I want to know what you're dealing with. So let me start with something that sounds simple but most people get backwards. In Jewish financial thinking, especially during inflation, the rule is this: you don't hold cash, you hold value. And those are not the same thing. Cash is paper, numbers in an account, a promise that loses meaning when bread costs twice what it did last year. But value is the thing people will always need, the thing that survives when currency doesn't. My friend David told me a story his grandmother shared with him. She lived through hyperinflation in Europe, the kind where you needed a wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread. Not because bread was valuable, because money was worthless. And she said the families who survived best weren't the ones with the most cash. They were the ones who owned the bakery, the apartment building, the jewelry, the skills. Because when money collapses, real things don't. So during inflation, Jewish investors tend to shift away from holding large amounts of cash and move toward tangible assets, real estate, even if it's just a small rental. Gold, not because it's shiny, because it's recognized everywhere and has been for thousands of years. Businesses that produce essential goods. Skills that generate income regardless of the economy. Even art, heirlooms, things that carry value across borders and generations. It's not about being rich. It's about being portable. About having wealth that can move with you, that doesn't evaporate when governments print more money or banks close their doors. Because inflation doesn't destroy value, it destroys currency. And if you know the difference, you can protect yourself. Here's another one that's deeply embedded in Jewish financial culture. Spend forward, not backward. What does that mean? During inflation, most people cut back on everything. They stop investing, they hoard cash, they freeze. And I get it. When things feel uncertain, the instinct is to turtle up. But Jewish tradition says the opposite. When times are hard, you invest in what builds future value, education, relationships, tools that help you earn more later. There's a concept called hachnasat orkim, welcoming guests, which is about generosity even when you don't have much. But financially, it translates to this idea that spending strategically during a downturn positions you better when things recover. And they always recover. I know a guy, older investor, who during the 2008 crisis bought rental properties when everyone else was selling. Not because he had tons of money. He borrowed smart, bought low, and now those properties are worth triple. He said inflation rewards the people who buy assets when they're cheap and punish the people who wait for safety. Because by the time it feels safe, it's expensive again. So Jewish families during inflation often increase their investments in things that appreciate: real estate, businesses, education for their kids, even relationships with other investors. It's counterintuitive, but it works because inflation makes things more expensive tomorrow. So buying today, when you can, is actually the safe move. Let's talk about something that saved Jewish communities over and over again. Multiple income streams, but not the way you think. It's not about side hustles or passive income in the internet sense. It's about building a financial ecosystem, where if one part fails, the others hold you up. Historically, Jewish families couldn't rely on stable employment because they were often excluded from certain professions or faced discrimination. So they built income diversity as a survival mechanism. A merchant might also lend money. A teacher might own part of a workshop. A doctor might invest in property. Everyone had fingers in different pots, not because they were greedy, because they were smart. And during inflation, this becomes critical. If you only have a salary and inflation eats into it, you're stuck. But if you have a salary plus rental income plus a small business plus some dividends from stocks, inflation might hurt one stream, but the others compensate. Now here's one that might seem old-fashioned, but it's incredibly powerful. Community lending and informal finance. In Jewish tradition, there's a concept called gemach, which is a free loan fund. Community members lend to each other interest-free for emergencies, business starts, whatever is needed. And during inflation, when banks tighten lending and interest rates spike, this kind of community finance becomes gold. Because formal lending gets expensive during inflation, banks raise rates, borrowing costs go up, and regular people get priced out. But if you're part of a community that supports each other financially, you have access to capital that doesn't follow those rules. I'm not saying everyone has this, but Jewish communities have historically maintained tight financial networks, where lending, mentoring, and partnership happen outside traditional banking. It's not about avoiding banks, it's about having options. And during inflationary periods, those options mean the difference between being able to invest in an opportunity or missing it because borrowing was too expensive. There's also shared knowledge, people who've lived through inflation before, who remember what worked and what didn't, and they share that wisdom freely. That intergenerational transfer of financial knowledge is like having a manual for economic survival that gets updated every generation. Last thing, and this is crucial, Jewish investors during inflation focus on preservation first, growth second. That might sound boring compared to crypto bros and get-rich-quick schemes, but it's the difference between surviving inflation and getting crushed by it. The mindset is protect what you have before trying to multiply it, because in unstable times, keeping your wealth intact is itself a form of growth. When everyone else is losing 20%, breaking even is winning. So you'll see strategies like keeping emergency funds in stable foreign currencies, not huge amounts, just enough to weather a crisis. Buying inflation-protected securities, investing in businesses that provide essentials, food, housing, healthcare, things people need regardless of the economy. Avoiding debt that adjusts with inflation, like variable rate loans, and favoring fixed-rate debt that becomes cheaper in real terms as inflation rises. It's chess, not poker. You're playing for position, not for the jackpot. And over time, that steady defensive approach compounds into serious wealth because you're not getting wiped out every time the market swings. So here's what it all comes down to. Jewish strategies for protecting wealth during inflation aren't secret formulas or insider tricks. They're lessons learned from centuries of economic instability, forced migrations, and survival. They're about holding value, not currency, spending forward, not backward, diversifying income streams, leveraging community, and prioritizing preservation over speculation. And the best part? None of this requires being Jewish. It just requires thinking like someone who knows that economies change, currencies fail, but value endures. Now I need you to do something. Comment below with this exact phrase, value over currency, because I want to see how many people actually get this concept. It's simple, but most people miss it. Just drop those 3 words and let's build a community of people who understand how wealth really works. Hit that subscribe button right now because you're learning things here that most financial channels won't teach you. This isn't theory. This is generational wisdom that actually works. And smash that like button because it tells me you want more of this kind of content. And listen. What I'm about to share in the next video is going to completely change how you think about money during uncertain times. It's a strategy that's been hidden in plain sight for decades, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Make sure you're subscribed because you're not going to want to miss what comes next.